Alright guys, so this is going to be one of the first videos I make using Ableton, and some of you might know that I'm a teacher here in Australia, which is kind of like community college kind of stuff, and for those of you in America. And basically, if you already know this, you're probably one of my students, and I'm making this video for you right now. So what we're going to be doing is looking at how to create types of productions in different genres using Ableton. And this is actually specifically going to be lessons that I teach my students, and I'm going to use this platform to kind of put some of my lessons out there and just see if anyone digs them. If you want more content like this on the YouTube channel, let me know. And if you're one of my students, you'll be forced to watch this anyway. So, so hopefully you're vibing on it. And we're just going to be creating music from different genres, so recreating different beats. And today we're going to look at this one right here, which is a famous song by Stardust. And if you don't know who Stardust is, it's basically one of the members from Daft Punk, and he did this track, Music Sounds Better. And first up, we're looking here at one of my favorite websites, which is going to inform us on how to set up a couple of things in Ableton, in our Ableton sessions. So we're going to be doing all of this stuff in Ableton. It's going to be great. So first up, we've got this over here, our 124 BPM, which we need to know. The key here is actually wrong. The song is actually in C major, not C sharp major, but we'll get to that later. But we need to know this, BPM 124. TuneBat is a great website for just quickly picking this sort of information. And then the other website we need to go to is one of my other favorite websites. It's called Who's Sampled. And with Who's Sampled, basically they show you any sample that's used in any song or vice versa. You can see check out a sample or check out a record and who's sampled it particularly, or you can check out a famous song and what they sampled for that song. So very, very cool. And the song we're going to be sampling from to match this track is from a track called Fate by Chaka Khan, classic disco diva track used in a house track. So we're going to look at how to sample this Chaka Khan track and recreate this Music Sounds Better with You track. So it should be a bit of fun. So if you know the song, it goes like this.
I'm not spoiled. He's a little child. He needs to be spoiled a little. He's only 12 years old.
I'll skip it ahead. Cool. And what's great about Who's Sampled is it shows you exactly the sample and where it appears in the original piece of work over here. Cool. And it's just that real little snippet at the beginning there. So if you have a listen here and then here. Cool. And I think that's pretty obvious. So what we're going to do, I can close that now. And we're going to open up our Ableton session here. And for those of you that are students of mine, you know the drill. The first thing you want to do in Ableton is actually set up your settings. So go to Preferences. I'm going to pick the correct device here, my Zentour. Quickly change that over. And you should be set by default at 48,000 hertz as your sample rate. If not, look, you might be doing different things. That's fine. You might be doing different things, that's fine, but this is how I teach my students. And we go to Record Warp Launch and we change this to WAV 24-bit. And then one other thing, when you're sampling from longer pieces of material, you want to make sure that Auto Warp Long Samples for now is off, because we don't want to import our Chaka Khan track and it warp that automatically. We're going to do that ourselves in a minute. So that's step one, set up your session properly. Step two, you want to do some basic stuff like saving your set. We're going to do that right now. Now, whenever I'm saving Ableton projects, the first thing I do is put the date, 06, 08 23. I'm dating this when I'm making this, so, and then I'm going to call it music sounds better. And those of you that are my students know that I'm big on making sure I chuck the date in, and just for reference later on if I need it, and then the title of the track that I'm going to work on. I'm going to save that to my Ableton folder. Cool. And then all I really need to do here is just, whoops, let me just resize this for a second so I can find my sample. There it is, Chaka Khan, Fate. I'm going to drag it onto my tempo track. Oh, and I did just forget one thing. I'm going to make sure I change my tempo to that 124 BPM that we saw. So we have that correct. Cool. And then now we're in Ableton. Cool. And then when we listen to the track, if we start from the beginning, if you listen carefully, you can hear the sample that we need to take for our loop actually doesn't start on the 1. It starts right here on the 2nd bar, on the 1 for the 2nd bar. So if we count that together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right there. So, and then if you listen, that's that sample that we're looking for. Cool. So all you do is when you're trying to look for the right place, I'll take it back a step. What we need to do when we're looping, if you're looping for the first time, you need to zero in on where the beginning beat is, the first beat of that loop, where the loop needs to begin. And you get good at this over time, but this might be hard to see if you're new to looping. But basically, these big spikes in the waveforms, like there and here and here, they're what we call hit points or transients. And they're just spikes in the audio signal. And usually, if you see a big spike like this one or this one, it means it's one of the drums. It means it's a kick or a snare or something loud, especially when they're short spikes in the signal. So what you want to do is use them as your reference for the beat. 2, 3, 4, bam. And we know that the 1 is right there for bar 2. So what we're going to do, we're going to zoom in using the plus key in Ableton. And as you zoom in, the grid becomes adaptive, which is great because so like the grid breaks up into smaller and smaller chunks. And we can kind of hone in right in on this kick drum, the beginning transient of this kick drum. It kind of starts here, this little bit here, just before the big spike kicks in. So you don't want to kind of click here. That's going to cut into that kick note, the first kick drum. So we want to start it back just a little fraction back, and then Command E to edit. All right. And then we can zoom out. And if you click at the top of your clip there, just with the hand tool, you can delete it. And then if I start from here where we just made our edit, we can hear that we've got the beginning of that loop there. So now all we have to do is find where the loop should end, which is going to be after another count of 4. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's right after that guitar. We get that bun-it, and then it's another kick drum. And that's where we make the next edit. So a loop should go for a count of 4 typically. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you make the cut just before the next 1 on the next bar. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. All right. So if you count that out as it goes along, I'll do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right there is where we want to make our edit. And it's pretty obvious because you can see this guitar strum. There's a da-da, da-da, and then the next kick drum. You can actually see that in the waveform once your eyes get used to looking at this stuff. It does take a while to get kind of used to this stuff, but if you're practicing, you'll get good at it in no time. Anyway, so I'll take that back a step before I jump ahead. So all you want to do, zoom right in on that kick drum. That'll be on the next bar, and Command E to edit. And then we're going to zoom out, and we're just going to delete all the rest of that track over there. We don't need that anymore. And now we've got our loop. And if I go Command L to loop that, you can see that I've got this nice, neat little loop going. And if your loop doesn't sound neat and it sounds like it's stuttering a little bit, that means you probably haven't made your edits quite right. You might have made an edit too early or too late, and then it's looping around messy. So I'll show you what that might sound like, just so you know what I'm talking about. Say if I let this, maybe I didn't kind of edit early enough, like close enough to the first kick drum. What you'll get is something that sounds like this. And it's got like a bit of a stutter as it loops back around. So if your loop sounds like that, it means you haven't cut it right on the beginning kick note, or maybe on right before the last kick note. So maybe you cut it too far back this way. Control L. And that feels a bit rushed because it's cut too early over this side. Okay? As it loops, it just comes a bit too early. Anyway, that's what it will sound like if you do it wrong, but this is what it should sound like. Cool. And then what I'm going to do is drag my sample all the way over to bar 5 over here. I like to leave a 4-bar counting. Sometimes I leave an 8-bar counting and start from bar 9. But for today, I'm just going to start from bar 5, which you can see up here. All right. I'm going to loop that sucker. Cool. And then because of our tempo mismatch, the original song is not 124 BPM, but that's what we need the sample to be. You can see we got from bar 5 to bar 6, and our loop kind of goes a little bit over the bar line. And so what we're going to do next to get our loop in time for the tempo is double click that waveform, and then your editor down here will come up. And I'm just going to zoom out of this a little bit so you can see the clip that we've just edited. This is the whole clip. If you click your magnifying glass and go up, it'll zoom out, down, it'll zoom in. And you can see the waveform there. And I'm just going to loop it. I don't know why the loop turned off. Cool. Now just adjust that in. Cool. So it's just representing what's on top there. And then what I need to do over here on the left is go to warp. All right. And when we click warp, now it's going to try and identify all of the hit points. Okay, so these little arrows that are here, all right, are potential hit points for the song. And you can see it's quite cleverly picked the first one, then it's identifying this snare and the next kick and the snare, and it's also picking up some of the hi-hat hits and stuff like that and the guitars and whatever, which is kind of cool. So the first thing you want to do is go in and click the markers for the snare and the next kick and the snare. Oops. And if you double click these markers, all right, these hit point arrows, they'll turn into little markers. Okay, so I'll just show that again. Whoops. All right, so actually I'll take it back a step. So once again, looking at the transients or the peaks, all right, this is a kick, this is a snare, that's a kick, that's a snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. All right, so they're the ones we want to click. So we just double click those hit points, and then the last marker you want to create is right at the end of your sample over here. So you double click, all right, and then now we've got a loop with all the hit points, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to drag these markers over, and what that does is it brings it to the bar, or the beat, I should say, not the bar, the beat that the kicks and the snare should land on. Okay, if you look here, this is our first count. This is the 1 in this darker gray, and the lighter gray is the 2. This is the 3, this is the 4, and now this section here is over the bar line. So we're going to go kick, snare, drag the next kick to where it should be, drag the next snare, and then all we have to do is drag our whole clip there, the end, all the way so it finishes flush. And if we look up the top, we can see that while we're doing that, everything has aligned. Okay, and then last thing you have to do to edit this up is you can trim it either up here, okay, or if you're clever, you can actually trim it back here as well, like that, and it trims it. So you can stay in this window down here and do your edits. All right, and then if I loop it, Control L again, so it loops just the new edited version. Cool, and then now we've got our loop, which is pretty cool. So that's how you do a nice neat loop in Ableton. Really quick and easy and very just precise if you want it to be that way. It's very, very cool. I love it. So just, yeah, something to think of. Then all we have to do is start our next, the next thing we have to do to our sample, and kind of the last thing, is apply some filtering. So on the original version of this song, and on any dance track, what they do is they use filtering on the sample. They do it in hip hop as well. And what filtering is a high pass filter and a low pass filter. So to get one of those, just click on your channel, double click here. So we can add effects to it. And then we're going to go to audio effects. We're going to go to EQ and filters. And we're going to put an EQ8, specifically the EQ8 filter, EQ. And I'm going to change one over here is by default at what we call a shelf EQ. All right, we don't want that. We want filters. So we're going to go high pass filter, and then I'm going to turn on 8 for this one, which is a low pass filter. Okay, this one, this one over here will filter out the lows, the low frequencies. This one over here is going to filter out the highs. Have a listen. So that's getting rid of the lows. And that gets rid of the highs. And you can probably hear this. These are typical DJ effects. This is what people use when they are DJing, and it's what people use when they're doing basic dance and hip hop type moves when they want to filter something out. So what we're going to do is try and filter out the lows of the kick drum and the highs of some of the cymbals, and just leave all the mids where the guitars and some of the basic parts of the rhythm section are. And what that allows us to do is put our own kick drums in and our own hi-hats in and add other instrumentation. It creates a bunch of space for the other instruments we're going to layer in, whilst keeping the sample audible. Have a listen. And that's pretty much a good starting point. And the last thing we're going to do to our sample is put a utility on, and we're going to mono the sample. Okay. Cool. And the reason we're going to do that is because in the original track, that's what they do. They mono it out. It's not stereo. If you listen to it without the mono, the guitar is way on the right, and we want it in the middle, like that. Cool. Then our sample is almost done. The last thing we need to do is to pitch it up. In the original, it is pitched up to a semitone. So let's do that. Let's double click our sample over here. And in the warp section, you can actually repitch it right there. And we're going to pitch it up one semitone. So if I turn it down, this is what it was, original sample. And we want to go up. And the cool thing is that puts it into the key of C, and we are now able to work in the easiest key signature ever. So nice. Awesome. So then we've got our sample, and we need to start programming our drums. So first up, I'm going to go to classic drums for house music, which is our 909 core kit. Okay. And actually, I'll take it back a step. What I want to do first is duplicate this sample. So Command or Control D, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And that way I have a 4-bar intro. Turn my loop off. And then my beat is going to start on bar 9. So I've got my core kit here, and I'm going to create a MIDI clip. Command Shift M for a MIDI clip. And I can start building my drums. Now, the kick drum is a simple 4 on the floor quarter note kind of thing. All right. All right. It's got a lot of ring to it. Maybe I'll see what other. I don't know if I need to update my Ableton. I think I've got my older version of Ableton here. I'll do that another time. I'm just realized I'm in my older version, so it's all good. I usually teach on a newer version of this now. Cool. All right. Anyway, what we're going to do is put a 4 on the floor beat, and you can click all of these in, or you can duplicate them across by going one note and then Command D across, and then you end up with cool, something like that. I'm just going to loop this up. And then I'm going to call this track, Command R, rename it to kick. And then on the next track, I'm going to do the same thing, create a MIDI clip, Command Shift M for MIDI clip, go to 8th notes. When you right click in here, in the grid, you can change the grid here, right click, change the grid. Let's put another 909 on there. I'm going to rename this track snare. Okay. And, whoops. Quarter notes, sorry. I said 8th notes, but I meant quarters. And this classic 909 snare, we're going to go on the 2 and the 4. Cool. And it's pretty good, but I'm just going to sort my mix window out. Snare's a bit loud. I'm going to just pull that down a bit. Cool, that sounds pretty good. And then last but not least, we need to do our hats. So you guessed it, we're going to create a new track, new MIDI, Command Shift T for MIDI tracks, create a new MIDI clip, Command Shift M. And we're going to put another 909 for the hats. And we're going to Command R to rename the track to hats. All right. And the reason why I do all my drums, like individual drums on different tracks, is for mixing and stuff, for leveling. It just makes it way easier. Everything sample-wise is way too loud in Ableton by default, so you want everything on individual tracks to mix them properly. And our hats are going to be 8th notes. So right-click in here, go to 8th notes, change your grid to 8th notes, and we'll go to hi-hats. It's a nice crisp hat. And I'm going to duplicate them all the way across. Actually, whoops, I'm not going to do that because this is a house track. And house tracks every hi-hat is always, typically, not always, but typically on the end. All right, so I'm going to put 4 hats. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I need to do is change this last hi-hat to an open hi-hat. Cool. And because I like to be tricky with things, that hi-hat sample, the open here, is a little bit long. So I'm going to try and edit it out. You can see it here. And what I can do is actually go into my drums. That sounds better. And edit that sample just a bit shorter. Why not? A little bit longer. Cool. And now the hats are a bit loud. Cool. I like to pan my hats, so I'm going to pan them. Sounding pretty good. Alrighty. So that's the basis of our drums done. And I'm going to take those tracks there and I'm going to duplicate them again, like we did before, 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, let's have a listen to where we're at with our track. And on bar 13, you can straight away hear what needs to come next. And what we're going to do is add another MIDI track. It's going to be the bass. So let's go Command Shift T, and I'm going to create a MIDI clip here to start our bass. Command Shift M. All right, and I'm going to rename this track bass, and I'm going to go over to my instruments on the left and go to instrument rack. Now I'm in the older version of Ableton here, so I've only got my older synth sounds. I'm gonna have to find the sample I want. Interesting. It's a bit too subby there. This one might work. Oops. Make sure I'm on the right track. Just go over. Yeah. And from memory, that's close enough for now. It might not be perfect, but we can put it in just as a placeholder. Let's have a listen. Whoops. I'm going to loop that up. Let's actually pretty good. It's pretty loud, but it'll do the job. So all you want is like a kind of smooth sounding bass with a bit of distortion on it, which is what this one has. That'll be close enough for the sound we want. So I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to scroll down here. Where octave am I in? So for this bass, it's in C1. If you have a different bass, you might end up in C0 in a different octave. All right, cool. And what I'm going to do is put my notes in, and the bass line is on the 1, the R, and the end, like that. And it basically goes like this. I'm going to drag those notes out a little bit and drag this one all the way to the end, like that. I might make these a little bit longer. We'll have a listen to how the bass sounds in a second. That cuts off a little bit too early. Yeah. Once you turn that bass down a little bit, sits in the mix pretty good. The only problem with it for me is that it's a little bit wide. I don't know if I can... I'm not the most experienced in Ableton, to be honest. I'm still learning lots and lots of stuff. But maybe I can just see if there's any width stuff going on I can change. It's compressor. Nothing too much there. It's too nerdy. Let's leave it as it is for now. Cool. Just turn all that stuff down. Okay, whatever. I'll just leave it as it is. Let's close that. Cool. It's fine. Sounds pretty good wide anyway. And then we've got our bass line, the E, E, F. So that's our notes there. E, E, F. All right. And it does that 3 times. So we're going to duplicate that. We're actually going to duplicate it another 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then all we have to do here on the 4th bar, the notes are the same length and the same arrangement. They just change. So what we're going to do is select the E notes, and using your up key, you can just go up, up, up to G, and the F, click on that, up, up, up to A, and it should be G, G, A. And then what we get is E, E, F, E, E, F, E, E, F, G, G, A, kind of like that. And let's have a listen to it looped. Cool, and that's the chorusy part of the track. In another part of the track, it does slightly change. It goes E, E, F, G, G, A, just every bar it changes, but we can just work on this part. If you want to go further and actually break down the song arrangement and do the whole arrangement, you can do that. But that's how we put in the bass. Now, if we go back, right back to the beginning of the song, let's have a listen to where we've come. Awesome. And that's basically the basics of that song. We could also add a synth if we wanted to, just to beef up the chords that are in the track. So the last thing I would do is maybe put some kind of synth chords to follow along with the bass line just there. So what I'm going to do to kind of make that easier is right click and duplicate, or Command D, and we'll rename this Synth. Whoops. Cool. And we need to build chords off this bass line. Okay, so the chords are actually going to be, seeing we're in the key of C, it's going to be E, E minor, actually, F, then a G, then an A minor. And to build that chord, we can go through and build it, or we can kind of use a bit of a cool cheat kind of thing that we have in Ableton, which is this over here. We can use scale. And if you click scale, it's automatically going to default over here to C major, and any of these orange notes are the notes we can use in the scale of C major. And whenever you build a chord, whether it's a minor or a major, all you need to know is that the chord for C, the E, you don't need to know whether it's supposed to be a minor or major. It's showing the scale, so the notes you can use to build the chord. So all you need to do is always skip one and then go to the next one. So in a E chord, in the key of C, the next chord is always, the next note is going to be a G. Whoops. All right. So what you do is you jump the F and go to G, and then to get the next note of the chord, you jump the A and go to B. All right. All you do is jump. Okay. And I've got a whole lesson on how to figure out key signatures and chords if anyone's interested. I'll put a link down below and maybe a link up here. And if you want to brush up on your music theory, you can definitely do that in that video. And all I'm going to do is just drag these out. It's my chords. Okay. And that's an E chord. All right, this will sound a bit funky. Just going to solo them up. Huh. Don't know why it's dropping down like that, but we'll change this in a second. And the F chord, we do the same thing. We just jump that next note and go to the A. And jump the B, and we go to a C. Okay. So if you're not familiar with building chords, to build chords, all you do is have your bass line, jump the next note, go to the second note after that. Okay, so, and it's actually called the third, but we won't get into that in this video. All right, and then that's our piano chords. So the next thing I have to do is select them. I'm going to go Command A, and I'm going to go hold Shift up to get them into another octave. And because there's a weird bass thing, I'm just going to get out of that. Let's actually put some synths here. So I'm going to go to synth keys. I have no idea what sound I'm going for here. Maybe something a bit more phasey, organ-y kind of. Maybe this. That's not bad. I might go and loop it. They just need to be higher in pitch. Ah, there we go. Fixed. And then what I'm going to do is duplicate that loop once again 3 times. And then all we have to do is go to our last one and change those chords to, instead of E minor, they're going to be G's, and the A notes are going to be wrong. So just select those and go up, because as you can see, they're out of key. And then we're going to grab the F's and make them A's. And once again, this note's out. Put that down, because remember, once again, when you're doing chords, it just goes G, jump one, next note available, jump one, next note available. And I could show this probably better if I folded the scale, which I probably should have done anyway, but whatever. Let me show you that. There we go. And if we're in scale mode, you just see the notes you can use instead of the notes you can't use. I might do a video on that later if anyone finds that useful. Anyway, I'm just used to seeing the whole scale, but probably should change my habits. I'm just used to old way. Anyway, let's have a listen to the chords that we've got here, and then we'll have a listen in the mix. They sound alright. It's pretty good. And those chords are pretty quiet in the mix. They don't have to be loud. And the last thing I might even do with those is put an EQ on them. Why not? Let's go. EQ 8. And they're just kind of there to reinforce the stuff that's going on in the song. They're not really there to do too much. And let's go back to the very beginning of our track, listen to what we've created, and I think we're pretty much all done. There you have it. Not too difficult a thing to try and pull off. Just really basic drum looping, basic 4 on the floor house beat there. Typical of most house music. Really, even now, like there's more complicated rhythms in house sometimes, but just a standard kind of contemporary house beat there with the Disco Diva sample. If you like this content, and you want to see more content of composition-based stuff and using Ableton, it is a DAW that I love using. I teach Ableton courses, and if you're interested in this stuff, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll have more content on the way. It's just something different I wanted to try. As I said, it's something I teach outside of YouTube, and I wanted to see if people are digging it out there in the rest of YouTube land as well. So if you're my students, hopefully you followed along and had a good time with this beat, and there'll be many more of those to come for you guys as well. So as always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe down below, and if you have any questions, hit me up in the comment section. I'm Mitch from the DIYRecordingstudio.com, and I'll catch you soon.